This past Saturday was UFC 313, Magomed Ankalaev versus Alex Pereira, and this is going to be my top 3 takeaways from the card. I'm going to start off with a couple honorable mentions, then I'm going to go from 3 to 1, 1 being my biggest takeaway from UFC 313, and there's a lot to talk about. Because you have Magomed Ankalaev snatching the light heavyweight title off of Alex Pereira, arguably the biggest star in the sport, at least active star. In the co-main event, you have Justin Gaethje returning from that brutal KO at UFC 300 to beat Rafael Fiziev on short notice. He was originally supposed to fight Dan Hooker. And you have many other important fights on this mega pay-per-view card. But let's start off with my first honorable mention, and that is that Maricio Ruffy is about to get some serious Dana White privilege. And I'm not complaining about this. I actually love when you have these up-and-coming killers who look unbeatable, but they haven't really faced a steep test yet, and then you just throw them into the deep end. I love those matchups. The only time I really complain about Dana White privilege is when you get undeserved title shots while there are deserving contenders. And Rufy went out there, and man, he brutally KO'd Bob Green with a wheel kick in the first round. He went out there and did not even get touched by Bob Green. And then he goes on the mic afterwards and calls out Beneil Dariush, who sits in the top 10 of the UFC lightweight rankings right now. I don't know if he's going to specifically get that fight. It wouldn't surprise me if the UFC does book that as like a fight night main event. But either way, I think he's going to get a massive top 15 fight next. And that's pretty crazy considering he came off of Dana White's Contender Series. He beats Jamie Mullarkey, slumps Jamie Mullarkey. Then kind of has a lackluster performance against James Yontop, where Yontop missed weight. Then he comes out against Bob Green on a massive pay-per-view. The UFC knew exactly what they were doing by putting Rufy opening up the pay-per-view main card, and he went out there and capitalized on it by winning via, one of the most brutal KOs in the last couple years. The way he slumped Bob Green face down, ass up, he took full advantage of the spotlight. And also, the UFC likes guys like him who kind of have a bit of personality, who kind of gets the hardcore fan base behind them, and then goes out there and actually performs. And then he goes on the mic and calls his shot. I think the UFC is going to give him a big fight in his next fight, which I have no objection to. I absolutely love when they do that. And I really do believe the UFC is going to get behind Maricio Ruffy after UFC 313. Next honorable mention. And honestly, this could be its own dedicated video, but ESPN Plus sucks. It flat out sucks. I've been saying this for years, but the fact that there were fans who could not purchase the pay-per-view for the entirety of the pay-per-view is unacceptable. It is disgraceful, and it is an embarrassment to the UFC. It's also an embarrassment to ESPN as a whole, because you have this huge pay-per-view card and people can't even buy it. I would have been absolutely livid. And that's not even the tip of the icebergs in terms of troubles with ESPN, but we'll get to that in a second. But the fact that people are trying to buy a pay-per-view, they're trying to give you $80 for what, 5 fights? They're trying to give you $80 plus tax for 5 fights, at least in North America. And they can't even get access to the pay-per-view. Some people had bought it and couldn't watch it. Most people couldn't even buy it. There was some error where they couldn't even buy it. That's unacceptable. And they couldn't get it fixed throughout the duration of the card. They couldn't say, you know what? We have, an hour and a half before the main event. Let's at least get it fixed before the main event or the co-main event. I thought at least, okay, those people having trouble, it's going to get fixed within the first fight. Nope, it was never fixed. And then their remedy is say, sorry guys, we're going to offer you up the pay-per-view for free the next day. Well, that doesn't help us because we wanted to watch it live. They are forcing people to piracy, which Dana White always complains about. Federal fucking prison, bloody, bloody, bloody. Oh, you're stealing from the company even though we don't pay the fighters shit of the profits. He's forcing people to pirate the fights because pirating the fights is easier than actually purchasing the fights from ESPN. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. Because ESPN, I've been a subscriber of ESPN Plus since it launched with the UFC. It's been crap. They've never fixed it. They've never improved it. I can't tell you how many times I go to ESPN Plus, I try to pull up a fight or something and it tells me you have to log in. And I'm already logged in. So then I have to exit it out, open it again. You have to log in. Exit out, open it up. You have to log in. Eventually, it finally lets me in without having to log in. Or I then have to sign out and log in. I can't tell you how many times I go to rewind a moment when I'm watching a live pay-per-view. You can rewind by, I think, 10-second increments. And I'm sure, actually, let me know down in the comments if you guys have this issue. There'll be a specific moment in time that I want to watch. Let's say it's 5 seconds ago. So I'll rewind real quick, 20 seconds, just to be sure I don't miss anything. And the second it gets to the moment I want to see, it freezes. And there's nothing you can do. It happens every single time. Like, for example, Magomed Ankalaev versus Alex Pereira. I wanted to see Dana White's reaction again. I go to rewind it. It freezes the second Dana White sees the cards from Bruce Buffer. And this happens so many times. I go to watch fight tape. I want to see a moment again to see exactly what happened here. Go back to rewatch it. It freezes. ESPN is absolute trash. The search function is broken. Half the time you can't even search cards and you can't search fights. There'll be fights that should be on ESPN Plus. You can't find them no matter what. There'll be spelling errors sometimes that causes it, but sometimes you flat out just can't find a fight on ESPN Plus. It is a broken system. And the fact that it's been like this since I believe 2018, so we're talking 7 years, ESPN Plus has been absolute trash. And the fact that during one of the biggest pay-per-views of the year, people can't even purchase the pay-per-view. They can't even give you their hard-earned money to watch the fights. That is a disgrace. And I am hoping, and I'm scared to even say this because, love the devil, I'm hoping the UFC goes away from ESPN. I think they're going to end up spreading it out and going to a bunch of different entities, and then we're going to have to search and find, which streaming service to watch it on. But at the end of the day, I can't stand ESPN Plus. It is absolute garbage. I'll never forget it lagged on me during Alex Pereira versus Yuri Prochazka 1. Right during the finish, it started lagging. Complete disgrace. Horrible app. They've not improved it ever. The search functionality is horrible. You can't even buy a pay-per-view. I hate ESPN Plus. That's not necessarily just a takeaway from 313, but I feel like it came to a head at UFC 313 with other people being upset about it. Let's move on to my actual list. Starting off with number 3, and that is that Justin Gaethje isn't a dead body yet. A lot of people, including myself, started to kind of write Justin Gaethje off after getting brutally slept by Max Holloway. Eye poked twice in the first round, then got his nose brutally broke with a spinning back kick to the face, then slumped out cold in the 5th round, at the tail end of the 5th round, in one of the most iconic knockouts of all time, even though it's a bit overrated. I'm like, you know what? Gaethje's never going to be the same again. He took Rafael Fiziev on short notice. He was supposed to fight Dan Hooker, and he went out there and fought a hard-fought fight. And even if he won, I thought in my mind going into this fight, and I didn't talk about this enough, if Justin Gaethje won this fight, I thought we wouldn't see the Justin Gaethje that we normally saw, who was willing to go to war, who, was wild and crazy. He was wild and crazy in this fight. He wasn't scared at all. He took some big shots on the chin. He took a big knee, I think in round 2 on the chin. He hurt Fiziev. Now, this was a very, very close fight, but the biggest takeaway really is not even that Justin Gaethje won. It's that he was able to go to war and come out on top, because I was really worried that where would the psyche be of Justin Gaethje after having his nose broken that badly, and then on top of that being slumped out really badly at the end of the Max Holloway fight. I didn't know where his mind would be at. And then he gets the last minute switcheroo. Dan Hooker pulls out with an injury. Where there's smoke, there's fire. I think he's on PEDs actually. He's cycling off. Where there's smoke, there's fire. He gets Rafael Fiziev, who I think stylistically is a bad matchup for him, even though he's beaten him twice. And he goes out there and beats Rafael Fiziev and almost finishes Rafael Fiziev. I believe that was in the 2nd round. I'm not sure. Was that in the 1st round or 2nd round? I don't know. It's irrelevant. But he went out there and fought like himself. He wasn't tentative. He wasn't deer in the headlights. He wasn't gun shy. He went out there and fought like he normally does and pulled it off and beat Rafael Fiziev in a massive co-main event on a massive pay-per-view. And with all that being said, the fact that he's not a dead body, he's still a legit contender in the lightweight division. There's some tentative talk about, Gaethje could be a contender for Islam, and Gaethje was supposed to fight for the title after he KO'd Dustin Poirier. I hate to break it to the Justin Gaethje fans, and I'm one of them. He will never beat Islam Makhachev ever. Ever. It's not possible. He's not beating Islam. Islam would outstrike him. Islam would easily submit him on the ground. It'd be an easy win for Islam. I know Justin Gaethje has only really lost to the best. Max Holloway, Charles Oliveira, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Who else was it? I'm trying to think who else has he lost to. Yeah, Max Holloway, Charles Oliveira, Khabib Nurmagomedov. He lost to Dustin Poirier and Eddie Alvarez a while ago. But he's only lost to the best. Islam is way more than Justin Gaethje. You know, he's biting off way more than he can chew. And it kind of does suck that he is kind of in line right now because Islam has cleaned out the division. And that fight, you know, the fact that he beats Rafael Fiziev, who would have been a fresh contender, I think, you know, just really proves that it needs to be Islam versus Topuria next, which I believe is the fight that the UFC will make. Yeah, Gaethje's not beating Islam. He might have beat Rafael Fiziev on short notice. I don't think he's beaten Islam, and I actually think Fiziev is better than Justin Gaethje. It's just a matter of Fiziev's cardio isn't that great, even on a full camp. He was asking for a fight for a while, so I'm assuming that he was in shape. That's why I picked him to win. Gaethje's jiu-jitsu is horrible, and he's even wild in the striking. I think Islam could piece him up on the feet like he did Dustin Poirier. So while Gaethje isn't a dead body, he's still going to stick around for a couple more exciting fights, which I'm super hyped about. I hope we get the Gaethje Hooker fight. I would hope the UFC would book that next. As happy as I am to say that, there is no chance he will ever beat Islam Makhachev, and it's almost a waste of a title fight. Moving on to my number 2 takeaway, and some of these takeaways could honestly be videos of their own. They could be dedicated videos, and I may still make this video, but I'm going to go off in this video about it anyway. The UFC commentary for the main event at UFC 313, Magomed Ankalaev versus Alex Pereira, was abhorrent. The last time I heard commentary this bad was Jan Blachowicz versus Israel Adesanya. Rogan and whoever else was on commentary that night was so biased towards Israel Adesanya when he was clearly losing to Jan Blachowicz. It was that level of delusion for the main event. I mean, every single one of those guys had lost their fucking mind. I'm talking Joe Rogan. I'm talking DC. I'm talking John Anik. I'm talking Dean Thomas. It was like, and I've said this before, but this was a really exaggerated case of it. They come in with a certain narrative that they want to push. And regardless of what they see with their very own eyes, they can't deviate from that narrative. Pereira's a mega star. Pereira's leg kicks are unbelievable. They can't imagine Ankalaev's outclassing him on the feet because Ankalaev's got to wrestle. In the first round, Rogan was saying that Magomed Ankalaev's legs were buckling from the leg kicks. Throughout the entirety of the 5 rounds, I've watched the fight twice. I see not a single hint of even the slightest mobility issue from Magomed Ankalaev because of the leg kicks. Not a single hint in 5 rounds. Rogan was acting like his legs were buckling in the first round. Rogan was talking about, yeah, man, Ankalaev, man, he's limping around. He's limping back to his corner. He's limping here. He's limping there. Then you have Dean Thomas in the second round when Ankalaev's doing his best work. He's walking down Pereira, beating him up and dicing him up and piecing him up. And Dean Thomas gets brought in. Sometimes Dean Thomas is good. Dean Thomas is like, man, Ankalaev's got to do more, man. He's got to do. I forgot exactly what he was saying. He was acting as if Pereira was putting on a masterclass. And in real time, we're listening to him. And in real time, we're watching Ankalaev tag Pereira. And somehow they're just stuck on that narrative because they're so brain dead because they already have this narrative coming in and they just want to push the narrative. And what drives me nuts about it is you have fans that are swayed by this commentary. Then to top it all off, it was a clear 4-1 for Magomed Ankalaev. To top it all off, they pretended like it was a close fight and it gave credence to the poetards, the Alex Pereira fanboys. It gave credence to them to act like it was a close fight. And then on top of that, I think half the MMA media is brain dead. And they're swayed by the commentary. They're also swayed by the crowd if they're there live. They're hearing the boos every time Ankalaev's landing or doing anything. They're hearing cheers every time Pereira misses anything. In the 5th round, Rogan, DC, and Anik acted like Pereira almost shut the lights off with a head kick that did not even land. It didn't even land. DC throughout the entire fight was like, man, Ankalaev's got to shoot. Ankalaev's got to shoot. Ankalaev is a kickboxer. Ankalaev was winning in the striking for the majority of the fight. There was like 4 minutes of clinch time, and people were acting like it was some clinch fest. And they acted like, man, I don't know. It's going to the scorecards. We don't know who could win. All because they wanted to set up acceptance. If Magomed Ankalaev got brutally robbed, it was atrocious to listen to. And Anik's co-signing it all. Anik wasn't as bad from my recollection. But Anik was co-signing it all. Rogan's acting like Ankalaev can't stand. He's limping around. He's buckling. The leg kicks are adding up. The leg kicks for Rogan are just the most annoying thing ever. He acts like, oh man, those leg kicks from Alex Pereira, man. It's like a predetermined narrative because Pereira has nasty leg kicks that Ankalaev is so injured badly from the leg kicks. Because they looked back at the on fight, they looked at Pereira's history of devastating leg kicks, and so they just made up a fairy tale that wasn't there. They were not based in reality. And the fact that you had fanboys of Alex Pereira and MMA media members co-signing this drove me nuts. But I'll say this right now. If you've been a fan of the sport for a while, if you remember Jan Blachowicz versus Israel Adesanya, if you did not watch that live, go back and rewatch the replay and listen to the commentary. Adesanya is being dominated by Blachowicz, and they're acting as if Israel Adesanya is winning. It was some of the worst commentary I've ever seen in my entire life. It matched Pereira versus Ankalaev. Get rid of them all. Get rid of them all. If you can't unbiasedly look at what's happening in front of you and give commentary on it, what's the point of you even having your job? You're essentially a salesman. You might as well be Billy Mays selling Clorox. I can't even talk about it anymore. It drove me nuts. It deserves its almost dedicated video. It deserves almost a dedicated video. Maybe I'll go back and rewatch, get direct quotes, and then make a dedicated video because they all deserve to be fired after Saturday night. The commentary for UFC 313 was absolutely atrocious. Let's move on to my number one takeaway from UFC 313. And this is kind of a two-piece. First is Magomed Ankalaev can be a UFC star. I've seen people crying and whining. I've seen Ariel crying and whining. The UFC has a star problem and Pereira was their biggest star. And I've seen fans crying like, oh no, Pereira had star power and now he lost. Oh my God, bloody, bloody. First off, stars come and go all the time. Second off, for the fans crying about Alex Pereira's star power, do you get a cut of the pay-per-views? Or are you just that much of a bitch shill that you want to suck Daddy Dana? Oh no, Ankalaev can't be a star, bloody, bloody, bloody. Oh my God, Pereira lost, where? Ankalaev can be a star. And the second piece of this, and we're gonna talk about it. I'm actually gonna show some things on the screen here in a second. And the second piece to this takeaway, this number one takeaway is Alex Pereira's run as a title holder is over. I tell you guys all the time, appreciate these guys when they're in a special moment in time. You have to appreciate these larger than life superstars or super entertaining fighters, elite level fighters. You have to appreciate them in that special moment in time because like that, it's gone and you don't even see it coming. You don't even realize it. There's a lot of people who don't realize it right now. Pereira lost to Ankalaev. If he rematches him, which I'm not even sure he wants, he said he wants it, he's going to lose again. He's never going to be champion again. It's just not going to happen. So you have to appreciate these guys when they're in that moment where Pereira's running through guys, coming back from catastrophic injuries on short notice. He's beating up number 8 Khalil Roundtree, walking him down after losing the first 2 rounds and stopping him in the 4th round. You have to appreciate those moments because just like that, it can be done. It can be done. And I think it is done for Alex Pereira. But let's end on something more positive. And that is that Magomed Ankalaev can be a star in the UFC. And I know this doesn't mean everything, but I want to show you guys this. And I actually showed this in another video. Magomed Ankalaev's belt wrap got 46.4 million views. It got 1.4 million hearts, which likes, and it got 50,000.5 comments. This belt wrap got a lot of social media traction. And I know this isn't the end all be all. I know social media likes and views isn't a full-blown indicator of star power. For years, you had dumbasses saying, man, Colby gets 100,000 views on YouTube, man. He must be a star, which simply wasn't true. But this is one of the many indicators you can look at for potential star potential. And I don't know why I said it like that. Star potential. And look at this. I mean, 46.4 million views on the belt wrap. We'll just play it real quick. And this isn't all I want to show you. I don't know if that audio is playing through or not. But there you go. Ankalaev gets the belt wrapped around him and knew he beats Alex Pereira. But that's not all. You also have to take into account Alex Pereira is the biggest star in the UFC right now, the biggest active fighter in the UFC right now. He went out there and beat Pereira. Regardless of what you think of the performance, historically, when one fighter, even if they're more unknown, beats a very popular fighter, they get the rub. They get some of that star power. They take some of that star power with them. If there is a rematch, I suspect Ankalaev will win more dominantly than he did this time. I suspect Ankalaev will beat Pereira even cleaner than he did at UFC 313. That's going to generate even more star power. Then you combine that with the fact he has the Dagestani fan base behind him. He has the Muslim fan base behind him. And you look at his home or his return home in Dagestan. Look at this video. Look at this video. And let me turn up the volume in case it didn't pick up before. Listen to that.
За то, что ты привез в Дагестан новый пояс UFC! Магомед, я от души, от всей души без многословия.
No, I don't know what they're saying. I'll skip ahead. But look at that crowd. Look at this crowd that showed up for him when he got home with the belt. Look at that crowd. If he goes out there, beats Pereira again, which I'm not even sure that Pereira's going to want that fight, but if he beats Pereira again, he has a lot of momentum behind him, and he also has a damn near undefeated record. His one loss is Paul Craig. He's on a crazy long win streak since then. Most people don't even remember that loss. And he is the UFC light heavyweight champion, which for some reason in the UFC, the larger the weight class, the higher the propensity you have to become a UFC star. The casuals are more gravitated towards guys of larger weight classes. And on top of all that, despite what a lot of people think, Magomed Ankalaev is a finisher. Magomed Ankalaev has knockout power. He's not some boring decision merchant like some people make him out to be. He's a very elite striker, arguably the best striker in the UFC after he just outstruck and put on a masterclass against Alex Pereira. If he keeps winning, if he beats Pereira in a more dominant fashion in the next fight, Magomed Ankalaev will have star power. We'll be looking around the division like, who can beat this guy? Who can beat Magomed Ankalaev? So that is my number one takeaway from UFC 313. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Are there any takeaways that should have been on this list that weren't? Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for watching.